Joe Metheny had always been rough. He endured a childhood of neglect with an absent alcoholic father, and a mother forced to work extra shifts to support her 6 children. They lived in Essex near Baltimore. Not many other details are known about his younger years, but his mother says he joined the army in 1973 when he was 19. They lost touch after that. He just kept drifting further and further away. I think the worst thing that ever happened to him was drugs. It's a sad, sad story, she said. Upon leaving the army, Metheny worked blue-collar jobs in the lumber yards and as a truck driver. Then came the incident that sparked his desire for revenge. In 1994, Joe Metheny was living with his girlfriend and their 6-year-old son in South Baltimore as a truck driver. He was on the road for long stints at a time. One day he came home to find his girlfriend gone, along with their child. Like Metheny, she had a drug addiction, and Joe believed she left with another man and took to living on the streets with him. He flew into a rage. He spent days looking for them, checking halfway houses and even under a certain bridge where he knew his wife used to buy and do drugs. Under the bridge, he found not his wife, but 2 homeless men whom he believed knew her. When they gave no indication that they knew where his family was, he killed them both with an axe he'd brought along. Immediately afterward, Metheny allegedly noticed a fisherman nearby who could have seen what he'd done. Just in case he had, Metheny killed him too. Some people deemed these first 3 killings crimes of passion, though he'd later develop a taste for murder. As soon as he realized what he'd done, Metheny panicked and tossed the bodies into the river to hide the evidence. He did get some closure on his son's whereabouts, saying, "I found out about 6 months later she had moved on the other side of town with some a-hole that had her out selling her a-word from drugs. They got it busted for drugs and they took my son away from them for child neglect and child abuse." Police arrested Metheny for the murders of the 2 men under the bridge, and he spent a year and a half in the county jail awaiting trial. He was acquitted of any charges as he dumped their bodies in the nearby river, and investigators could not find them. Without physical evidence tying him to the crimes, Metheny went free. He resumed his original quest of seeking out his missing wife and child, but this time, something was different. Though he had spent a year and a half waiting his trial, jail time had clearly done nothing to slow Joe Metheny down. Shortly after being released, Metheny murdered 2 sex workers when they failed to provide him with information on his missing girlfriend. This time, however, he had a better idea for disposing of their bodies. Instead of tossing them in the river, Metheny brought the bodies home. There he dismembered them and stored the meatiest parts of them in Tupperware containers. What didn't fit in his freezer, he buried in a truck lot owned by the pallet company he worked for. It seemed that he was now murdering people for sport as much as for revenge. Over the next several weekends, he mixed the sex workers' flesh with beef and pork, forming it into neat little patties. He would sell these meat patties out of small barbecue stands he opened on the side of the road. During this time, his customers would all consume bits of human flesh. They became unwitting hiding spots for the bodies of Metheny's victims. Whenever he needed more special meat, Metheny would simply venture out and find another sex worker or a vagabond. He later told the police that he received no complaints on the meat tasting funny. In fact, no one seemed to notice that his burgers had a little something extra in them. "The human body tastes very similar to pork," he said. "If you mix it together, no one can tell the difference. So the next time you're riding down the road and you happen to see an open pit beef stand that you've never seen before, make sure you think about this story before you take a bite of that sandwich."